3 weeks ago today, the government's Minister of Finance delivered Canada's budget for this fiscal year. What we're debating today is the Budget Implementation Act. In this Parliament, it has been given the title C-69. That's a vile title. The last Parliament that lasted long enough to get to 69 government bills was the 42nd Parliament, this government's first Parliament. It's been downhill ever since, and this Liberal government thrives on divide and conquer misinformation narratives in order to keep Canadians unfocused on how much worse this country's prospects have become after 9 years of this aimless management. I say aimless benevolently, as if this Prime Minister and his flock don't actually know the harm they are causing the economy in the country. But I worry that it's much worse than that. I worry that Canada, being the first post-nation state, means we dismantle all that Canada has stood for, all that Canadians value in their institutions, and all that new Canadians strive to be part of as they seek to build a new life in this once great nation. After 9 years, we are far less than we have been. Our economy is the sick child of the G7. Our international standing in the world has suffered greatly. Our friends no longer see us as a dependable ally. Our military is limping along, and we continue to underfund our capabilities in what is clearly becoming a more dangerous, less secure world. The world is now seeing more conflict than it has seen since the end of the Second World War, almost 80 years ago. This government remains oblivious to what's on the horizon because it is content to navel gaze and mislead Canadians about where we actually stand in the world. Bill C-69 still has a clang to it that has crystallized what has been misguided about this government from its outset. The last C-69 from 6 years ago was successfully challenged all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada, where finally the constitutionally offensive parts of the legislation were overruled. But that was a legal journey that took years, as if it couldn't be foreseen and avoided. Years of divisiveness in this country, years of project delays, years of holding back tax-paying sectors of Canada's economy while shoveling money out the door to well-connected insiders, years of economic destruction, years of watching our closest competitors move forward in a rapidly changing world while Canada's opportunities were held back, years of this government feeding propagandists billions of taxpayer dollars to trumpet their recycled narrative to no benefit for the country, but much benefit to the pockets of connected insiders. The previous C-69 was a vile affront like no other, and this one can only pale in comparison. Budget 2024, as delivered, was a 416-page document with lots of back-padding and nonsensical narratives, plus a 74-page supplement. It was entitled Fairness for Every Generation. What a great marketing slogan, because excessive overspending will affect every Canadian equally badly. But I would caution that it is particularly bad for young Canadians, those that are being saddled with paying for the cost of $1.3 trillion of Canadian debt and growing with no end in sight. How do we tell new Canadians or those entering the workforce that, congratulations, you are now inheriting your share of debt for money that was thrown away by a spendy government that knew nothing about fiscal management? $30,000 per head, in addition to the provincial debt that in many cases doubles that number, in addition to mortgage debt if you're lucky enough to own a home, in addition to your student debt and your consumer debt and your auto debt payments. Is it any wonder that Canadians are considered some of the most indebted people in the world? And I've been clear in this House many times that the metric this government tries to use, debt to GDP, is neither comparatively useful nor is it, in fact, honest, because it tries to recollect the amounts that Canadians have had deducted from their paychecks specifically for their retirements, both in the Canada Pension Plan and in the Quebec Pension Plan, and pretend that those amounts, over $800 billion, should be used as collateral for this government. It doesn't work that way elsewhere, but this government is content to mislead Canadians that they can use it in their justification of showing financial prudence. It's dishonest. If the government's backup plan for maintaining fiscal stability in the future is to take back, I should say steal back, the funds Canadians believe belongs to them independently managed for their retirement, then I should say, tell that to them directly. The Minister of Finance should directly say, Canadian workers, your pension earnings are our collateral, used to capitalize our overspending. This Budget Implementation Act that we are debating takes what was in that nearly 490 pages of budget information and puts it into legislative format. 660 pages of legislative changes to be addressed, debated, and voted upon an omnibus bill. It would be interesting if it had much to do with the budget, but as always, it's a mishmash of legislative changes, much of which have absolutely nothing to do with the 490 pages presented in this House of Commons 3 weeks ago. But I was really looking for the parts of it that were relevant to young Canadians that are trying to buy a home or trying to rent a home in a rising housing market with stagnant salaries, while inflation is making their purchasing power for food, rent, clothing, heat, light, education, the basics, more challenging. The budget was presented with much fanfare. It's called Fairness for Every Generation. But the government seized on the problem being felt most acutely by Canadians, particularly young Canadians, and presented an array of programming to address the real issue of housing, the inability to house Canadians. The cost of buying a house has doubled under this government's watch. The cost of renting a home has doubled under this government's watch. Has take-home pay doubled? Absolutely not. As a result, the ratio of housing prices and rent to income has doubled in these past 9 years. Housing isn't just twice as expensive. The ability to fund your home now takes twice the percentage of your take-home pay. Canada's economy has withered in relation to our peers. Nothing gets done in this country unless government writes someone a check to do it. Please set up business here with taxpayer money, and it will pay $4 million to $5 million per job provided, as long as it's in the right area or what they think is the right industry. Flavor of the day stuff, chasing what everyone else is chasing, risky business. Taxpayer-funded corporate welfare and funds that will never be recouped in the economy. I counted the number of initiatives this government would take to alleviate housing concerns. Remember, the most resonant concern to the public, and there were 53 measures to address housing: building, financing, mortgaging, targeting, bribing, pontificating. And then I went through the 660-page bill, and I found 2 points that were relevant to housing. The first is the increase in the home buyer's plan, withdrawal plan limit from $35,000 to $60,000. I'd like to see the size of that target market. A Canadian who has over $60,000 in their RSP and doesn't have a home, definitely not the financial makeup of the great majority of Canadians who have found themselves squeezed out of Canada's housing market. The second measure allows the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation to increase their mortgage default insurance limit from $750 billion to $800 billion. Now remember, that $750 billion was temporarily increased from $600 billion in 2020 to deal with the effects of the pandemic long past. I suppose some temporary effects last longer than others. This is $800 billion of risk that the government bears for mortgages in Canada. That's in addition to the almost $1.3 trillion in debt the Government of Canada owes money managers around the world, or the $350 billion of liabilities at the Bank of Canada. Canada's federal government debt payments now total $54 billion a year. That's more than this government spends on health care. That's more than Canadians pay through the GST. The issue with housing is a cautionary tale. Housing should be a sound investment, one that holds its value over time, especially if the homeowner provides the proper upkeep, a store of value for years when income will be lower. It's a savings plan and is a contrast to paying rent, where your payments will always rise with inflation and the value accumulated is paid to someone else. Sometimes that makes sense, but most Canadians benefit from owning a home. Madam Speaker, how much longer do I have? Let me finish up here, Madam Speaker. For the sake of young Canadians that hope one day to raise their families in homes like their parents did or like they anticipated when they moved to Canada, let me advise the government. Listen to all the voices that are telling you this, including the Bank of Canada Governor. Get the budget balance back. Stop causing inflation. let the economy grow, and stop punishing sectors that are not your chosen sectors. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, where does one start when you read a speech of that nature? You can tell it's drafted by, the Conservative Party of Canada as they try to mislead Canadians from coast to coast to coast. Compare that speech to the reality. When you take a look at one of the things I raised, Madam Speaker, was the fact that Canada is #1 in the world in terms of per capita direct investments. That means people around the world, corporations around the world, are taking a look at Canada as a place to go in and invest, Madam Speaker. Compare us to Stephen Harper. In 10 years, they created under 1 million jobs. In less than 10 years, we've created over 2 million jobs, Madam Speaker. Trust me, get outside. It's not as bad as the member tries to portray. Canada is not broken. My question to the member is, why does the Conservative Party want to try to portray something that's not true? Canada is not broken.
Member for Calgary Centre.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'll start where he finished. I don't think I used those words in my speech at all, but I am a little affronted. I think the member should know that I write my own speeches, and that is a speech. You can come check on my computer, is word for word written by me. So, in effect, you have destroyed the economy. The Liberal government has destroyed the economy here. Let's take a look at what he's put on there as stats. There is no investment coming into this country without government assistance. It's in my speech. Government assistance, here we'll give you billions of dollars if you set up a plant in Canada. How good is that for the Canadian economy? It replaces what used to be private sector money investing in Canada. That is now going elsewhere. Minister of Finance misled Canadians and misled this member when she said that Canada is attracting the most investment from around the world. Yes, some is coming in. Much more is leaving. On a net basis, we are doing very badly. I hope the member would look at that.
Questions et commentaires. L'honorable député de Longueuil-Saint-Hubert.
Madame la Présidente, bon, j'ai pris juste les 2 dernières minutes du discours de mon collègue, mais je l'ai entendu parler de logement, puis ça m'a un peu interpellé parce que là, le problème depuis quelques années, c'est que les libéraux investissent en logement. C'est pas qu'il n'y a pas d'investissement. Il y a des investissements, mais ils sont mal ciblés. Ils ne fonctionnent pas. La grande stratégie nationale qui a été lancée en 2017, il y avait 82 milliards de dollars là-dedans. Et là, en 2024, aujourd'hui, après la moitié de la stratégie nationale, il faut encore construire 5,8 millions de logements. On le sait, le privé seul ne fera pas la job. Tôt ou tard, il faut que le gouvernement investisse là-dedans ou vienne dans le marché intervenir pour construire des logements sociaux, notamment. Moi, j'entends les conservateurs juste dire « Oh, on va couper. » Mais couper... Moi, j'ai jamais entendu l'ombre du début d'une solution à la crise du logement de la part des conservateurs depuis qu'ils en parlent dans cette Chambre. J'aimerais ça entendre mon collègue là-dessus.
Member for Calgary Centre.
Je remercie mon collègue pour la question. Dans le passé, la solution pour le secteur de housing, maisonnage, et seulement d'avoir un marché pour les gens qui bâtirent des maisons, les acheteurs et les vendeurs des maisons. Ce n'était pas un problème avant ce gouvernement-ci. Mais on dit maintenant que c'est nécessaire d'avoir le gouvernement dans le milieu pour ajuster le prix pour une maison au Canada. Pourquoi? Est-ce qu'il y a... Je suis sûr qu'il n'y a pas assez de... des maisons sociales au Canada, mais ça, c'est un petit problème au Canada. Mais dans les rues de Calgary, il y a des conseillers à Calgary qui disent qu'on a besoin de 20% de notre marché d'avoir des supports sociaux pour le housing. Et ça, c'est trop, Madame la Présidente.
The Honourable Member for Nunavut.
And I'd like to thank the member for his intervention. It's great to hear that we can hear intelligent speeches from the Conservatives. It's great to hear that not all Conservatives take a play bingo approach to saying as many slogans as they can in their intervention. So I really appreciate that very much. In 2022, the RBC Royal Bank invested $41 billion in fossil fuels. So knowing that in this time of climate change, wouldn't the member agree that it would be better to invest in renewable energies, in projects like the Kivadluk Hydro Fiber Link project that would get Nunavut communities off of dirty diesel and transition to more renewable energies. And what this government can do is make sure that companies like the RBC are not subsidizing fossil fuels, but transitioning to renewable energies for the betterment of our for Earth, so that we can combat climate change in a better way.
The honourable member for Calgary Centre in 20 seconds.
I thank my colleague very much for her question. Well stated. The issue with climate change, the issue with energy in Canada is we need all kinds of energy. The energy sector is projected to grow by 160%. As far as the energy that Canadians are going to consume, we are going to need all forms: renewable energy, geothermal, solar, wind, but we are going to need to continue to have that baseload of hydro, that baseload of nuclear, that baseload of oil and gas in order to make our economy function, to make sure that Canadians have the basics